Hey everybody, this is Kodak here. So, a few things about my recent Kill Team video. So, it turns out earlier this summer, there was a rules update regarding what I called the cheapest couple of kill teams, that 5-man band of Space Marines. So, what they did was they actually made it so that those squads, rather than including 5 Space Marines, now contain 6, which kinda throws off my calculations, but do not despair. Right after my video came out, like a couple of days after it came out, there was another rules update released last Tuesday that updated the Space Marine army to allow you to mix intercessors and assault intercessors into the same kill team, which is a much anticipated change by the community after all, that finally gets a nice mixture of different Space Marines for your kill team. And to clarify, this is because Intercessor Marines and Assault Intercessor Marines are actually different things. Intercessors get a rifle and are designed to fight at range, while Assault Intercessors get a pistol and a chainsaw for close combat. So, all you have to do to bump this set of 5 Assault Intercessor Marines up to legality is to go to your local Games Workshop store and take the freebie Intercessor Marine you can get there and just plunk it into your army. No change in price at all, aside from a brief day trip. Now, it's far from a balanced army. You probably want 2 to 3 intercessors for a better squad, but hey, it's still Warhammer for $14, and I've still seen copies of issues 13 and 16 floating around for cheap on the internet, let alone the plethora of third-party options that allow you to get things like partition sprues and used armies. But moving on, a lot of people actually asked me to help cover probably the most confusing set of rules in the game, and that would be the shooting rules and line of sight, which, yeah, considering that this game is a cover shooter and Games Workshop's manuals on these kinds of things are kinda dog, I will strive to do my best. It's why I made a point of making my melee combat tutorial include the parry mechanic in a pivotal role, because none of Games Workshop's own examples convey any value to the mechanic. Games Workshop, I love ya, but your manuals are kinda bogus. I edit rulebooks as a hobby, I'm more than happy to do it for cash. So, I will apply that same genius to help explain the shooting rules in Kill Team, because a lot of you opened the rulebook to the shooting section and were met by this page that's nothing but a wall of... Okay, yeah, this is alarming. Let's start from the beginning. To perform a shooting action in Kill Team, first you must confirm visibility. Can the shooter see the target? You can determine visibility if any part of the shooter's figure can draw a straight line to any part of the target figure with no obstructions. Even if a piece of scenery is between the two, as long as the two can see each other, then they have visibility. So partial scenery doesn't necessarily mean you cannot take a shot at a target. However, there is big, bulky terrain that is totally solid and cannot be seen through and prevents visibility. This is blocking terrain. Next, check for point-blank range. If the shooter has visibility and is between 2 and 1 inches from the target, then the attack can be performed normally, as the shooter is simply too close to the target for them to benefit from cover, since the shooter can just reach around or through it. Get within 1 inch though, and you enter engagement range. At this point, the target is so close that they can just push the shooter's gun aside with their hands, meaning both sides must resort to fisticuffs. And given the number of things in Warhammer that are surprisingly resilient to bullets, this happens remarkably often. After checking for visibility, you next check for line of sight. This is actually a different thing. Visibility is asking the question, can I see the target? Line of sight is asking, how clear a shot do I have on the target? Visibility can be generally eyeballed, but line of sight is a different requirement. Can you trace a cone from any point on your model space to the 2 widest part of the target's base without interruption? If you can, then the shooter has a clear line of sight. The target is basically a sitting duck and can be shot at normally. If, however, the line of sight is interrupted by an obstruction that is within 1 inch of the target, then the target has cover. This can include pieces of terrain, but it can also include other miniatures that are on the map. If the target has cover, check their current order. If the target has a conceal order, then they are technically ducking behind that obstruction and are no longer a legal target. If they have an engage order, however, the shooting attack can proceed, but the target still benefits from the cover. When they get attacked, they can take one of the defense dice that they would normally roll and plunk it down showing a 5, indicating an automatic success. Gotta keep in mind the risks of shooting into cover, considering that your target kind of has that save in their back pocket at all times. However, that can be offset by vantage point. If the shooter fires from a point that is at least 2 inches above their target, they can fire on them as though the target had an engage order, essentially erasing a layer of cover. And in a lot of cases, that's where it can end. This big page of painful text, optional depending on your terrain setup. Because when it comes to obscuring terrain, we thankfully have a clear precedent. If we check the Recruit Edition manual, it states clearly that none of the terrain included in the Recruit Edition is considered obscuring. So none of this, from the ramshackle walls to the piles of junk to the rapid deploy barricades, are considered obscuring terrain. The obscuring rules simply will not come up if you stick to terrain features that only offer light cover, things like low walls and trenches and the such. As for heavy cover, you can just use these solid, uncompromising blocks. Want verticality in your map? Stack these blocks on top of each other. Or use basic scaffolding, as floors are not counted as obscuring terrain. They can block visibility, but they don't bother line of sight. What the obscuring terrain rules page is actually referring to is terrain pieces like this. I mean, yeah, this is obviously a heavy piece of terrain with tall walls and lots of structure, but it's also got, like, windows and blown out sections and stuff. So how do we reconcile this? Like I said, you don't have to. Don't want the headache? Don't use this kind of terrain. But I can see where this sort of terrain offers a lot of interesting tactical complexity, full of sniper nests and places to clamber around. Now, the big thing that I think makes this page about obscuring terrain so confusing is the bird's eye angle that doesn't clarify too well what the obscuring structure is. While it may look like it's one of the scrap iron structures from the Recruit Edition, it's actually this huge piece of ruined wall that has windows and cracks in it. So let's take a look at obscuring terrain. Like I said, terrain is obscuring if it is heavy, as in a massive wall, container, or building, but still has holes like windows or battle damage that lets somebody see the other side of it, and thus acquire visibility. The rules in that update I mentioned before also mention intervening terrain, which is specifically terrain taller than the models involved, though that would mean the barricades from the Recruit Edition would be obscuring now. Oh, I give up. Let's say an orc is inside this bombed out house and my intercessor wants to deal with them. The rule states that if there is a piece of obscuring terrain between two combatants, if the target is more than 2 inches from where that terrain crosses line of sight, they cannot be seen and thus are not a legal target unless the shooter is also within 1 inch of the obscuring terrain. So let's say that the orc had a conceal order last turn and was in cover right next to the window. On his turn, he switches to an engage order and shoots at the Marine. Oh no! My Marine is more than 2 inches from the obscuring terrain, but the orc is within 1 inch of the same wall, and thus can easily shoot out of it. However, this engage order, combined with how close he is to the obscuring wall, he is within 2 inches after all, means he is open to a shooting counterattack. But now, the orc is going to do something cheeky. He's going to spend his move action to disappear deeper into the dark house. Now that he's more than 2 inches from the window, he is obscured from the Marine's line of sight and cannot be targeted unless my Marine runs up to the window himself. Both are obscured from each other. Let's say the fight goes on a little bit longer, and now the two find themselves on opposite sides of the outside of the house, both against the walls. Both are within 1 inch of their closest walls, meaning those walls do not obscure their line of sight. However, this also means they are both within 2 inches of their attacker's far wall, meaning those walls don't obscure them either. Both are free to shoot at each other, though both gain the benefits of cover. If either one disengages and retreats away from the house, then they both become obscured to each other again. Like I said, kinda confusing and again, largely optional unless you are into this kind of complexity. I hope these few visual examples have helped make things easier to understand. So yeah, that's the big update of the week. I've been fighting an ear infection and that hasn't made it easy to work, but I have a few more small projects planned to supplement the big one, so stay tuned. Until next time, this is Kodak signing off.